So in this lecture, we're going to continue our discussion of transformations by looking at what effect multiplying some part of a function by a negative number has on it. And again, we're going to specifically focus on the effect that it has on a function's graph. So I'm going to start the same way that we did the previous lecture. I've got two functions here. F of x equals x squared plus 1, which we actually saw in the last example in the previous lecture. And this new function g of x, you notice what I did here. G of x is just negative f of x. I just took that f of x formula, multiplied the whole thing by negative 1. So what effect does this have? Well, I want you to kind of approach this the same way. Right? Try graphing this, plot some points if you have to, right? Then come back and we'll look at my graph and we'll talk about what effect this has. All right, so you can see, I think, pretty quickly what's happening here, right? F of 0 is 1, where g of 0 is negative 1. So this point that was at 0, 1 is now at 0, negative 1. And if we try one more, f of 1 is 2, g of 1 is negative 2. So this transformation is literally just reversing the sign of every y value. And the effect that has is it creates a mirror image, right? The word we use, you see it in the heading here, is a reflection. This reflects the graph across the x-axis. All right, now at this point you may be wondering, well, what if you put a number up there besides just this minus 1? Or what if we put a minus 2 there? Or a positive 2? Okay, I want you to hold on to that thought. All right, we are going to talk about that, but that's going to be the topic of our next lecture. Right? For this one, we're just going to focus on what effect a minus sign has. All right, so what I did here is I took the function value, the y value, if you will, and multiplied it by negative 1. Well, what if we go the other way? What if we just put a minus sign in front of the x value? What happens then? Well, I've got another example here to illustrate that. Notice I started with f of x. Again, this is one we've seen before in a previous lecture, or you could just, because I'm going to ask you to graph these again, just like I have before. And again, if you want to do it by plotting points, that's fine. But to get to g of x, what did I do? I took the x and replaced it with minus x. All right, so in other words, g of x is equal to f of minus x. Right. So where before the minus was on the outside of the function, now it's on the inside. All right, so again, if you like, you pause, right? Take a minute, try to graph these functions, see what you come up with, then we'll go over them together. All right, so these are my results here, and this one is maybe not quite as obvious to see what's going on. Let's try looking at some points. If we look down at the bottom, f of negative 1 is 0, right? On the other hand, g of positive 1 is 0. So this point that was at negative 1, 0 has now been moved over to 1, 0. All right, so let's try another one. F of negative 2 is negative 2 plus 1. That's negative 1 squared is positive 1, and you see that right here. Right now, g of 2 is negative 2 plus 1, which is negative 1 squared, is 1. Okay, so this point over here has gotten moved over to here. Right, so again, this is a little tricky because it crosses the axis here. So this point is over here, where this point is over here, right? And we cross over here and here. Right, and again, this one I think is the trickiest one to see. So let me actually clear this out so you can see the whole thing. And what we've done here, if you draw a line down the middle of the page on the y-axis, and you fold the paper in half, right? These points go to here. These points go to here. What you're seeing is this graph is reflecting across the y-axis, right? So that's the effect we get by replacing x with negative x. So we have now seen two different reflections, right? And these are summarized here. Putting a minus sign in front of the function reflects across the reflects across the x-axis. Putting an x in front of, putting a minus sign in front of the x reflects the function across the y-axis. All right, so we've got one more of these to go, right? And that I alluded to a couple slides back. What if we put a number in front of the y value or a number in front of the x value? What effect does that have? Well, that's something called a dilation. That's what we're going to look at in the next lecture. And then in the one after that, we're going to bring all of this together. Right, we're going to look at how we can look at a function and kind of break it down in terms of all these different transformations that are happening to it to see what its graph is going to look like.